All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. We are Indy investors talking Indy investing. What we like to do on this podcast is really just kind of break down some tips, some tricks, some insights, anything about Indianapolis that can hopefully help you when it comes to investing and what you have going on in your portfolio. So I am very excited for my guest today. I got Neil Goradia on here with me today, digging into a little bit of everything that he gets into. I feel like, whenever I have a conversation or doing something with him, he's got something new going on. And what we're going to get into big today is land developments, which I don't think last year at this time I even knew he had any inclination of doing anything like that. But so we'll dig into that with him today. So with that, let's get on with the show. All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. My name is Brian Snyder. Hopefully I can bring you some value today, and I know that will happen with the guest that I have. Neil, how's it going, man? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. So and like I said, I just kind of mentioned at the beginning of you kind of brought this idea to me of like, hey, I think some of your listeners could like really maybe learn from some of the land development stuff I'm doing. I was like, wait, what are you doing? I thought you were like flipping houses and doing some buy and holds, and this is kind of a new thing. So I'm excited to dig into that with you. I know you and I met for coffee last week and kind of talked about that as well and things, but before we get into that though, I would love for you to kind of just share with our listeners a little bit about kind of your background, kind of what you were doing, and then how you got into investing in real estate here in Indy.
Right. So it's a really interesting path that I took. As you know, there's usually never a direct path to where you want to go. You always end up zigzagging a little bit, and I'm no exception. Went to school for engineering, graduated from Purdue, and just went down the corporate path of, worked at a really large corporation and really didn't think anything about it. I mean, I thought I was doing what I was supposed to do, and 2 or 3 years went by, and I was hopefully impressing my boss, and I was going to hopefully get a promotion, and everything just changed when I read the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, which was very it was just came out of nowhere. It was not like I was seeking it out or anything. I was just at a friend's house in Michigan and pulled it off their bookshelf, and really didn't even do anything about it. Just put it right back on the shelf and just had it in my mind. It just planted the seed, and I really didn't understand it because I didn't have a chance to read the full book. But came back to Indy, and I kept thinking about it, and eventually I found a copy on Amazon for like $3. And I said, if looking back, if that book was $20, I don't know if I would have bought it.
That's crazy. Yeah. Like it's a small investment. What it can really do for you. Yeah.
I know. No. So I bought the book, I read it, and it, changed my life. So at that point, I started talking to all my buddies about it. And there was one friend in particular that was just as enthusiastic about it as I was. And we thought it was a great idea to partner because we could limit our risk a little bit. And so we spent the next year going to Syria and learning from people and, going to sub meetings. And, this was all back in 2007 and maybe even as early as 2006. And we finally pulled our trigger at the end of that year of 2007 on a house, which I still own today. But all kinds of things went wrong. It was the epitome of what the worst first deal you could ever do is. But, cut my teeth on that deal and really learned a lot and just kept at it from there.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit of like, I know you said, I think it was somebody that you were working with, you decided to like kind of partner and things like that. So how did that kind of come about, and how did you work? Kind of a lot of people will say that of like, don't do business with friends or, anything like that. So what's some advice maybe you have for people, or kind of how did you guys kind of develop that relationship and kind of split up the duties, or even just like kind of have faith in each other and some trust in each other to be able to do this and things like that? And I think you guys actually even brought some more people in, not just the two of you guys, right?
So I've been through a number of partnerships, and this is a topic I'm pretty passionate about, and I've learned a lot about. I mean, I've changed course many times on this throughout my career, but when you first start, it's great to have somebody else to split responsibilities with and to share risk with. But at the end of the day, it's very possible to have a bad partnership too. I mean, just because you're two people that want to do the same thing does not mean you're going to do a great job at it, or that you know how to work with somebody else. So I had to learn a lot. And my first partner I had was, he was a really good friend. And because of that, we saw each other often. We played basketball together. We did all kinds of things together outside of business. And it just made sense, and we got along really well. But what I found out was that, with different things going on in our own personal lives, you never know when people's priorities start to change. So, you know, we both just started doing different things outside of real estate. And eventually it came to the point where, you know, he was probably going to move up to Chicago and I was still going to be down here. And we just naturally grew, you know, to separate at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, in the next partnership I got, you know, we were happening to be in the same place. We were both working together at that corporation that I mentioned, and so over the years, I've kind of gone in and out of different relationships on the career path. But what the advice I'd probably give to people is, and I've heard this a lot from Steve Richards, which is when you partner with somebody, you want to make sure it's 1 + 1 = 3, which sounds kind of funny, but it makes complete sense because it really doesn't make sense to just individually contribute the same amount of work just to divide it in half again, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There has to be a mastermind that you form, you know, hypothetically, where when you guys are working together, you guys get so excited and all these new ideas come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you're making 3 times what you could have made, you know, individually. And so I always keep that in mind and make sure that I feel like I'm adding as much value as they are to the table.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. You very well said and things. That's a really good point to kind of consider and stuff. Now, also, I want to kind of dig into a little bit of, so you were working your job, you know, for this corporation for a while, kind of before you decided to like, hey, now I'm getting out of it. Now I'm going to do, this is what I want to be doing. I'm going to do this full time. A
Right.
lot of people go through that kind of transition of maybe they jump out, you know, too soon or they hang on too long and stuff. When did you know it was kind of the right time for you to kind of make that move of like, all right, I'm getting out of the corporate world. I'm going to quit my, you know, my day job and I'm just going to focus on this.
So I knew the moment I finished that book, and I know that's not the answer you wanted, but that's how much it affected
Yeah.
my
That
my
darn
my.
Robert Kiyosaki, he does it to so
It's
many
just,
people.
I mean, it's just, well, it's because
Yeah.
I never knew people were walking around not working for someone else.
Yeah.
I knew people owned businesses, but I didn't understand the passive income part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to your question, I mean, I read that book probably in 2006, and I was not able to quit my job until 2014. So, and for a long time, even when I was partnered with my friends, we created a password called Quit Jobs 2011. That was our password to all of our work computers and to any software program we had at work. So every day we reminded ourselves that that was our ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And it still took 3 years past that point
Mm-hmm.
to quit. So it was a lot of work and just man, I can't tell you how much work we put in. I mean, we went into work around 7 in the morning, 7:30, left around 4 or 4:30, went straight to our properties that we had purchased to renovate those properties, and we didn't get home till about midnight. And
Yeah.
we did that every day for 2 years. And it was just mentally draining, but that is how we learned how a house worked. I mean, we learned how
Mm-hmm.
to plumb a house. We learned how to crawl through a crawl space that was so tiny that you couldn't even get up to turn around. You had to army crawl backwards to get out. I mean, there were like all kinds of amazing experiences looking back, but in the moment, it was very mentally draining.
Yeah. So why was that so important for you to learn that versus, you know, someone like me? I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to be a little bit more passive than that. I'd rather just, if I get the right guy, I'll pay the contractor to do that. So why was that important for you to learn that and kind of know those traits and be able to do those things at houses?
I think it was important for me personally. You know, it might not be the same for everybody, but I just really like. That's why I got into engineering, is I liked how things worked, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
know how they work. But on a more general sense, when you're a landlord and an owner, and you're trusting other people to do work for you, you know, there's a level of control that you lose. And I think understanding the process, the nuts and bolts of it, allows you to call them out when things aren't going the way they should. They can't just give you an excuse
Yeah.
as to why things aren't going well. And I think I view money as a bathtub where money comes in, but money can also come out
Yeah.
and leak out. And so it's a really good way to control your costs, which ultimately allow you to succeed much faster and get to your goals much faster.
Nice. So you guys had the original goal of, you know, that 2011 and
Yeah.
you're finally able to like kind of jump off the cliff at, you know,
Mhm.
2014. So how did, you know, it took that extra 3 years?
Mhm.
When did you know, hey, this was the right time for me. I need to do it now.
Yeah, it was a very hard thought process to go through because I knew that everybody liked me at work and I didn't want to upset them. And I also learned to kind of keep things under wraps about what I was doing outside of work because I didn't want that to change their perception of the effort that I was putting into work.
Yeah.
And in reality, I was working a lot more efficiently because I knew I wanted to think about real estate. So I just got my work done that much faster. But my thought process in quitting really came to, do I have, the amount of money coming in from my rental portfolio that can support me? And I ended up taking a large pay cut because I wanted to leave so badly. And I knew that the upside, was really high when I did leave. So
Mm-hmm.
I really figured out what was the bare minimum that I could make from my rental portfolio to support me so that I could quit. And I literally wrote it down in a spreadsheet, and I got down to some ridiculously low number, to where every time I even went to Taco Bell, I remember I was scared to order too much because I was just, that's how tight my budget was. But eventually I came to the realization that I'm never going to hit the number that I need to hit. I'm only going to get close to that. And then I'm just going to have to take the leap. So the day came where I don't know if it was just a bad day that the previous week, bad day the previous day at work, or what it was that tipped me over the edge. But I just woke up that day and I said, today's the day.
Yeah.
And you'll have that day when you know.
Yeah. So no, that's awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Let's get into a little bit of, so you have some buy and holds. You've also flipped some properties and things like that.
Yeah.
What are just, maybe, can you give us a couple, just tips on, maybe one tip that you would kind of recommend for, especially maybe a newbie starting off, like, or looking to grow their portfolio on the buy and hold side, and then maybe
Right.
the kind of like one on the flip side too.
Sure. Yeah. So I've done a little bit of everything. I think every 3 or 4 years, I tend to kind of get bored of the routine, so I switch to something else. But yeah, I think for a newbie investor, they really got to keep in mind what their ultimate goal is. I mean, if they want to quit their jobs, right, then they got to focus on the cash flow part of it. And in my opinion, the best way to get there is maybe flip a couple properties to build up some cash so that you can buy properties for the long term. And I've always had the opinion that you don't want to over leverage yourself. I know burring is very popular right now, but you got to be careful with that, because if you only pull out or if you pull all the way up to the 80% out of the property, or even more sometimes, you're stuck with a large mortgage payment that you have to make. And if one thing goes wrong, you really you have to dip into your pocket again
Yeah.
to make
Like COVID or something like that, if that hits. Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. And so my tips to newbies would be, obviously, network the most you can on with people like yourselves, and with organizations like Cyria and INRIA. But also just don't be afraid to take that leap and learn. Maybe limit your risk with a business partner that you think you gel well with. Um, but ultimately, keep your overall goal in sight that you're trying to head to. Don't get shiny object syndrome, where every couple months you're like, you know what, this might be a quicker way to get to my goal. No, I mean, you've just wasted the last couple months then, because you're switching to something else. So really staying the course is very important. And it's really demotivating if you just keep switching and just starting from scratch again. So it's better to fail over and over again doing the same thing and ultimately learning, than failing at a bunch of different things and never getting traction on anything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good advice. I like that. All right, let's switch gears a little bit then, and kind of let's talk a little bit about kind of your new passion as you switch gears into
Yeah.
this and stuff. So you're talking about, some land development stuff. Let's kind of give a background of kind of like what that means, kind of what you're doing. And I know you've done a couple of these projects. You got one you're working on now, so just give us a little background on kind of what you got going on.
Yeah, so we got a couple of land development deals going on right now. We finished our first one that we started in 2015. It was 41 lots on 20 acres, and basically it was just a piece of farmland when we came across it. And so we went through and got it rezoned to a single family neighborhood through the city of Noblesville. We went in and put in all the utilities, so the sewers, the storm drains, the water service, the electrical, and we got all the ground ready for the home builder. And then we signed an agreement with the home builder to come in and actually build the homes, because we don't have any expertise in actually building homes. So they have a takedown agreement to where they agree to take down a certain number of homes per month. And then by the end of that agreement, in theory, they bought all the homes in the neighborhood, and you're on to your next deal. So things don't always go the way you want them to, but we finally, as of this month, signed a purchase agreement to buy the last 6 lots in that neighborhood. So it was a very long, here we are in 2020, so it took 5 years. And I think we learned a lot of lessons, and our next one hopefully won't take that long. But here we are.
Yeah. So I really kind of break this into about like kind of three different parts that I love to kind of just break down with you. So you got the, hey, finding this piece of land and, kind of, whether you're marketing for that and kind of figuring out like, hey, what's the right price and negotiation, things like that. Then you have the setup of being able to, do the drainage and like have the
Mm-hmm.
specs and do all that type of thing. And then there's that third part, like the partnership with a home builders association and things.
Right.
So let's kind of just go through each of those things. So with one of the ones that you do, and you can just kind of pick one of the projects, or maybe
Yeah.
it's that first one you go back to. How did you guys come across that? Like, were you guys marketing for this, or like, did you guys like, hey, I'm going to send out some direct mail. I'm going to do this. Is what I'm looking for. Did you have that in mind, or did you just come across it, or what?
It's a little bit of both. Somebody that I used to work with in my corporate job sensed that I was getting a little bored of the routine, and he said, "Have you ever thought about?" And he knew I was in real estate, and he said, "Have you ever thought about development?" And I hadn't even known what the word was for it
Mm-hmm.
until he mentioned it. Nothing ever came of it. Fast forward 3-4 years later, and my old roommate from Purdue called me up one day and he said, "Hey, I got a job in Indy. I'm moving from Chicago to Indy, but I can't find a piece of land or a house that I want to move my family in. And but I did find this larger piece of land that I would really like to maybe build my house on. Do you know anything about how to develop this into a neighborhood?" And I said, "No, but I do have a real estate background. I do know some things." And he said, "Well, I don't have the real estate component, but I know how to develop like commercial buildings and high-rise buildings in Chicago. So maybe we can combine our forces and try to figure out how to do this, and I can build a home in this neighborhood." And that's how it started. So I don't think if I was listening for it, I would have even caught him mentioning it to me. It probably would have
Mm-hmm.
just gone in one ear and out the other. But because I had had that conversation early on, it once you buy a certain kind of car, you see that car everywhere, and that's
Yeah.
kind of the idea.
Yeah. So are you guys doing anything now, like where you are, like kind of marketing for that, or on the lookout
We
more for that, or?
we don't really market too much for it. It's a little bit of a niche in the sense that you won't see them on the MLS.
Mm-hmm.
You won't even hardly see them on LoopNet. For the most part, um, you'll just look online on maybe like a Zillow, or maybe there are other websites like CoStar, which is, I think, LoopNet is owned by CoStar.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some different websites you can look at that show that they're on the market. But really what we did was you can literally just drive around in these areas, in these suburbs, just outside the metro area, and there's signs everywhere: land for sale, land for sale. And really it's just about calling every one of these people and saying, how much, why, what's the timing, this is my experience. Because they don't even want to talk to you usually if they don't think you're serious or that you know what you're doing, because everybody wants to buy land, right? Like,
Yeah.
that'd be really cool to do, right? But
Yeah.
it's not easy.
Yeah, especially Hamilton County. That's yeah,
Right.
that's pretty good there. So, let me ask you, kind of before we move into that next step, let me ask you kind of how that. So this was the first one that you did. I always,
Yeah.
as I'm working with other wholesalers and people buying houses here in Indianapolis, one of those things I always advise on is like, hey, have a credibility packet, something you can kind of hand off to show them like, hey, I've
Yeah.
done business or I've done this, even if you just done one deal.
Right.
So you looking at this first deal, and everybody wants to buy land, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
hot commodity and things. How were you able to kind of be like, hey, I've never done this before, but this is trust us, we're okay.
I know. And we went to many, many banks and they all turned us down.
Yeah.
And so as the story goes, right. So what we did was, first thing was, we all had professional jobs. So that was a plus. It's not like we were, just fresh out of high school. So we put together our team on a Word document of all the traits we had that maybe uh, carried over to the real estate world. So although I was working in a corporation, I was a project manager. So, you know, you can use that in real estate. You can
Right.
project manage and make sure you're on schedule and on cost. Um, and then Ed obviously had development experience, and then I had the real estate experience. So we put that all together. The other thing we did was, when we were trying to find funding, we were getting turned down by these banks. We tried to seek out maybe a strategic partner where they would help us finance it, and they would also be able to contribute a portion of the work. So we were able to find a company that was a surveying company, and they're on the west side of Indy, and they were really cool guys to talk to, and they could potentially do the surveying for our project, but they could also fund a portion or all of the project itself. And so we no longer had to rely on a major bank for the construction loan. And at the end of the day, we ended up doing a portion of each. We had some construction financing from the bank and some from our partner. But that was one way we were able to get over that hurdle. And in exchange, I mean, we didn't have any money to pay these guys, but we gave them equity in the deal so that they could see the upside on the back end.
Gotcha. Very cool. Very cool. Now, so kind of that next step then of kind of like, kind of, you said you guys, basically like sectioned it off and, did, basically getting all the specs in there and figuring out how it's going to work, the drainage, a lot of things. Now, like how much did your kind of engineering background and that kind of stuff play into this? Or could someone, like me that doesn't have an engineering background or has never done this before, how much did that play into it? And did that allow you guys to kind of have success with it? Or is this something that, hey, this is something I want to get into and I'm just going to kind of dig into it and I can teach myself how to do this. And what do you think about that?
Probably more so the former, because um, there's a big foundation of knowledge that you kind of have to know. And I didn't have a lot of that development knowledge, but my partner Ed did.
Yeah.
And so he really came to the table with all the tools that we needed for that. But for somebody who wants to get into it, like on the second project we're doing, um, he just doesn't have time. He has a full-time job. He's doing other things. And we decided to outsource the engineering component of it. So there's companies you can go to for that portion of the work. Now, the benefit you get with having that in-house is you can tweak things to make your bottom line a little higher. You can, they're just going to come in boilerplate and say, oh, this is the way the neighborhood should look. But we could come in and say, you know what, it's going to cost us more money to cut those trees down just so that this road can go straight. Let's just curve it a little bit, and we're going to save a little bit of money on pavement, and we're not going to have to cut these trees down, and the people that live there are going to like having trees in their yard. So we approach it more with a personal touch versus maybe an engineering company that is just collecting a check from you and just going to get it rezoned for you.
Yeah. So how about that third piece then of having that kind of relationship with a home builder and being able to kind of develop that, work with them, and then be able to still kind of allow your vision to come through and their vision as well, kind of, in part with each other.
Mm-hmm. That's been tough because they have a certain price point that they want to sell to their clients. And so they want to make sure that there's enough amenities in the neighborhood that are worth it. I mean, you're not going to go in and buy $1 million home if, you're backing up to a busy street. So, there's certain things you expect at certain price points. So it all comes down to what builder you've partnered with, and within that builder, which product line they've chosen for your neighborhood. And based on that, you choose certain amenities, whether you're going to have a pool, a basketball court, where you're going to put the berm full of trees and landscaping, and you make all those decisions with them so that they feel confident in selling the lots when you're done. Because, you don't want to feel super confident yourself, but then hand it over to them and have them look at it and say, that's going to be a really hard property to sell because it's backing up to something you don't want to look at.
Yeah. No, it's so intriguing and so awesome. So one of these questions, and this, I don't know how this question is going to come off, but like one of my thoughts is, so you're working with this home builder and you're like kind of basically they're selling off his lots. Like my question is like, why not just sell the whole thing to them, like from the start and just collect a check right from the beginning?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that home builders themselves don't do developments or they don't develop land is because it's high risk. Mm-hmm. In 2008, there were a lot of home builders that did develop their own land, but because all of a sudden the economy tanked, they pretty much went bankrupt, or at least their development arm went bankrupt because they were in the middle of moving dirt at a site. And then all of a sudden demand dropped and they said, it doesn't make sense to complete the construction of this when we know we're not going to be able to sell the lots. So it's a huge risk for them. And they just don't want to be in that game. So now our preference obviously is to sell everything at once. But when you do that, you take a big hit on the overall price that they're willing to pay. They want a discount. Mm-hmm. And so the takedown structure is there for a reason where it limits their risk. And for us, it allows us to still have a contract with them on getting a number of lots sold per month. And we also get escalators in there to where starting in next year, everything will go up 4 or 5%. So it gives them an incentive to try and sell as many lots as fast as possible.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. Let me ask you then, just kind of through that whole process and kind of looking back at that, that first deal and stuff like that, what's something that maybe like a mistake that you made that you're like, okay, now I understand that there might be a long list of them. Is there one that like really stood out of like, hey, I'm going to make sure I don't do this again?
Yeah, like you said, there's probably not even enough time to talk about.
It's another 3 episodes or something.
Yeah, it's another episode there. But I think one of the big ones that we ran into was on the picking of the contractors to do the work because, never having done work on a bigger scale like this, you don't know who to use. And um, so I think we would have tried to do a better job vetting people, but also, like we made a big mistake when it came to the wetlands that we found on the neighborhood land. We didn't know that part of it was declared a wetland, which means you're not allowed to build on it.
Yeah.
And that was a six-figure mistake. I mean, we literally had to pay for that wetland to be relocated to another person's piece of land,
Oh,
and it
wow.
cost us over $100,000.
Yeah.
So it was like doing that all over again. We would make sure, and we have been making sure now that we do that kind of due diligence up front before we commit to, buying somebody's land. So when you actually put in a purchase agreement on a piece of land, I mean, the list of contingencies is super long. It's not like a single family house where you just say contingent on inspection. No, this is like contingent on soil borings, contingent on zoning, contingent on, wetlands not exceeding a certain price per area. And it just goes on and on.
Yeah. So, no, man, great stuff. I really appreciate all the insights, and I love just like picking your brain. I have like a ton of questions even on this stuff, so I really appreciate it. As we're running a little bit short on time, though, I do have one more question for you before we get out of here, and this is the one that I'm intrigued by because this is stuff I love to do, and I know that you were able to actually go to like spend 9 months over in Asia, like traveling and things like that, but still maintain your rental portfolio and do some projects, things like that. So what's kind of some advice for somebody like that? Like, it's one of my favorite things about real estate is like, I can do my job wherever I can be at home or I can be on the road and things like that. I can travel. So what's just some tips or some advice you have somebody like that of like in that spot of like, hey, I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to do this, but I also want to make sure everything's going well back at home with my projects.
Right. Yeah, that was the number one reason I got into real estate. That's what it's all about. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
being able to live your life and spend time with your family and people you care about while not affecting your day job and being able to have that work-life balance. So I think, I did my first 3 wholesale deals while I was in Asia, which is crazy, but it's possible because you can send out marketing from anywhere in the world. You can answer the phone from anywhere in the world, and you can do remote closing. So there you go. I mean, you can do it from anywhere. It was a challenge because of time zone differences, but I'd say that real estate really makes it possible as long as you have the right team that you trust on the ground. As long as you get that set up before you go travel, then you can rely on them to answer the phone and to get things done while you're not there. And every deal that I do, I keep that in mind that I do want to go on longer vacations. I do want to take my family on trips. I'm not going to get involved in something that is not going to allow me to do those things. And that's what my goals are going into the future now. It's not so much real estate related goals, but it's more about spending, like where I spend my time, right? And it's not so much like, oh, I need to get to this threshold or that threshold. It's more about have I been able to help my daughter with her homework, or have I been able to take that trip that I wanted to take with my family? And so that's what real estate has allowed me to do, and I'm so grateful for finding it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love your story. Just love what we're bringing to the table. Thank you so much for the value that brought to the show today. Really appreciate that. If someone wants to reach out to you or just connect with you, maybe they have a question or whatever it is, maybe hey, Neil's a cool guy. I want to like get to know this guy. Whatever it is, what's a way that they can connect with you, buddy?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook pretty regularly, LinkedIn, all the social media platforms. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'm always on the phone, available to chat to anybody. So, yeah,
Awesome. Sounds good. That's a wrap for the show. If you have any questions for me or if I can help you in any way, don't hesitate to reach out. You can get me at brian@simplewholesaling.com or hit me up on social media. Love to help you out. Like I said, any way I can. And that's a wrap for this show. We'll see you next time on the Indy Investor Pod. Take care.